Hallo, met Dennis. Whisky podcast Drop or Dram. Hey, leuk. Wat zeg je nou? Is Alex Driver van Compassbox in de hand? Ja, nee, natuurlijk wil ik hem heel graag even spreken. Ja, alle mooie, prachtige dingen die veranderd zijn bij Compassbox. Natuurlijk wil ik daar alles van weten. Hey, ik spring in de auto en kom naar je toe. Tot straks.
Dit is Drop or Dram, de podcast voor whiskyliefhebbers. Van beginner tot kenner. Schenk je favoriete glas in en geniet met ons mee.
Ja, de auto staat voor de deur. Ik ben in Gouda bij een prachtige wijn- en whiskywinkel. Want zoals jullie net begrepen, ik kreeg een telefoontje. Alex Driver in het land. Ja, wie is Alex Driver? Alex Driver is Insights and Education Manager van Compassbox Whisky. Mensen die deze podcast wel vaker hebben gehoord, die weten dat ik een zwak heb voor Compassbox Whisky. John Glaser, de oprichter en founder whiskymaker van Compassbox Whisky, had altijd een eigenzinnige kijk op het maken van whisky. Afgelopen jaar heeft hij afscheid genomen van zijn bedrijf. Maar daar is Compassbox Whisky zeker niet mee van de kaart verdwenen. Sterker nog, zijn compagnon whiskymaker James Saxon heeft het stokje overgenomen. En ze zijn fijn doorgegaan op de manier waarop ze altijd whiskies maakten. Maar ze zijn eigenlijk ook wel weer een stapje verder gegaan door een core range te gaan maken. En natuurlijk prachtige andere composities van whiskies. Zoals Compassbox Whisky zegt, long live interesting. Ja, ze zijn echt bezig met het maken van whisky op een iets andere manier. En daardoor Scotch whisky more interesting te maken. Dus ik zit met Alex Driver, voormalig voice actor, kwam ik net achter. En natuurlijk Insights and Education Manager. Dus laten we maar eens eventjes flink babbelen over Compassbox. Welcome, Alex Driver.
Thank you very much.
So, as I was saying in Dutch, and you get it because I subtitled it for you, John moved on, but his legacy is still there. James worked as whiskey maker for Compassbox beside him, and the last few bottlings were mainly from his hand and composing them themselves. So, but something exciting with Compassbox is happening at the moment, and the most exciting stuff is that there is a core range now. Is that, before we go into the core range, is that we're going to say goodbye to all those lovely specialties, or?
So it's a funny one. We definitely aren't saying goodbye to the limited editions. We have built this core collection around the idea that a kind of strong, interesting directions of flavor core collection gives us the creative freedom to explore even more so than we previously have done. So we're definitely not going to stop making interesting things. And actually, arguably, we've kind of turned these core collection whiskies into the most interesting things we can.
Yeah, because that's one of the phrases you put out there. The world of Scotch whisky making more interesting place.
I mean, that's been a core tenet of Compassbox since the beginning.
It's always been that way, yeah.
And what's funny, and we've been talking about this in the company a lot recently, it is more interesting. You know, we started 24 years ago, and the world of Scotch whisky is a lot more interesting nowadays. And yet there's still more to do. There's still more we can do. And so rather than look at it and go, mission accomplished, let's all kind of sit back, sit on our laurels. What can we do next? How can we push some more boundaries, really explore specifically flavor within Scotch, but also concepts?
So in the beginning, you were quite a rebel, and in the old-fashioned whiskey. So and then again, in the old days, we say still single malts out there. They were probably gone in the late 90s. It only started with a lot of single malts, but it was not the drink to go to. We discussed that in previous time. So single malt is really came up and back from the late 90s, early 2000s when Compass Box started, and then you took it on a different level, and not even taking single malts, but taking single malts and creating completely new flavors, tastes that nobody else normally would have done or could have done. And now we're in the beginning 2024, end of 2024. Beautiful core range. I recognize one of the names because you put it out as a limited edition in the first place. But now I'm very happy to see it as one of the core range. And I'll mention it straight away. That's the Orchard House. When it came out, I was really amazed.
So yeah, Orchard House, we've been making it since 2021. For us, it was a really fun exercise in when you're presented with a problem, what do you do about it? And our problem was, I believe you've heard this before, we didn't get this kind of whiskies we wanted to. We were looking for kind of ex-bourbon, so first fill. We wanted more of that kind of wood character coming through, and it just wasn't there. And actually, it was James at the time, our kind of whiskey-making director, who said, this isn't a problem. This is a beautiful opportunity. And so rather than lean into more of a wood-driven kind of whiskey, actually, you can take something that's a bit lighter, a little bit kind of more spirit-driven, more of those kind of like fruit notes. We have a bit of in our glass.
Oh, yeah. You already presented us with a glass, and we're professionals, as we say always, because it's still before 12, way before 12 in the morning. But that's the way we work. Our palate works best. So you presented me with a lot of glasses, and we'll go through the whole range and the new stuff as well. But
yeah,
the Orchard House is so lovely and indulgent in fruit.
It's on the nose. It's super light. It's got this kind of real crispness as well. And people don't talk about whiskey being crisp or whiskey being kind of vibrant or kind of like that kind of bright notes that you get from it. And yet it can be. And we're going to kind of definitely talk about this. But the whiskey is fun because it has the biggest spectrum of flavor of any spirit, right? You can go almost anywhere within flavor, and being a blending house, we can then explore this idea as much as we want to. So we can take those different elements, those different components, and then make something completely unique.
Yeah, that's because you're not, as you say, you're a blending house, you're whiskey makers. You have your own stock from completely different distilleries, so you're not confined by your own distilleries or your own flavor profiles that are available from your own company. Your company reaches out to the furthest fields away there, and that makes it so interesting. Like you said, when people talk about whiskey flavors and you buy crisp, light, then people go, no, I'm way beyond that. But exploring that kind of taste, it surprises a lot of people, because in their minds they think, no, we need strong, heavy.
Yeah, whiskey's this austere, this very serious, very kind of intense, very kind of particular spirit, and people are like, no, you have to drink it in a certain way, you have to enjoy it this kind of like in front of a fire on a leather chair. And that's a very reasonable way of enjoying whiskey.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, but you can also enjoy it outside.
Yeah,
with friends.
The sun is out.
A hip flask.
Yeah.
I mean, God, you can add a bit of soda water to it. I mean, do whatever you want and enjoy it that way, because it really, when you come down to it, it's the flavor. It's the flavor that drives the experience, the flavor that drives the enjoyment of it. A little bit of it is the kind of collecting and the history and that kind of the time that's gone before us. But also it's what you get to take from it now.
get the fun more into the whiskey again.
The fun.
You can enjoy from a leather chair, but the fun part is also other things. Fun can be found in a lot of other places, other activities, and this one is one of them. So I straight away, it is called the Orchard House, but I can see me wandering around some of the orchards, picking my apples and go like, don't like apples, but I like it in my whiskey.
Yeah, exactly that. And actually it's that kind of, because it's got such a strong nose in it. I mean, it's very hard to explain over the medium of a podcast, but it genuinely has the most incredible nose. The aromas, the smell is just very particular. And what we found is, since we launched it in 2021, a lot of other brands have been leaning more into this kind of paring back the oak, taking away that kind of heavy kind of post-distillation influence and trying to focus more on that distillery character, which is exciting. You know, that's one of the things in Compass Box that we do, is we try and push a boundary, not because we want to be the only person doing it. It's nice to be the first one, but it's nice then to have people follow and do other things and broaden the horizon of what whiskey can be.
And like you say, you're pushing boundaries. It's not like you're outside the boundaries. It is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's there to explore, but people forget about it or don't even think about it. That's more the case I get.
Absolutely. And it becomes self-referential as well. So you can become very introspective.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's a neat way of moving on to Nectarosity as the next one, because we had Orchard House.
Yeah, you had the Orchard House. That was a limited expression, and now one of the pillars of Compass Box, more or less.
To be very clear, we did start it as a core collection. It was always meant to be part of the core.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there are limited expressions of it, but it was always meant to be a replacement of an old whiskey called Oak Cross.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, these are two very different whiskies. Oak Cross, very heavy oak, still clean-leash. So primarily clean-leash, primarily liquid within the whiskey. What's cool is we've been buying it as new make spirit, aging it ourselves. So we're much more in control of the aging process. This is sort of, as we've grown up as a company, we don't have to worry too much about securing old stock, because we've got stuff we've been aging that we know what cask it's been in, that we've been able to control. But yeah, couldn't replicate Oak Cross again. Ended up with Orchard House because of this wonderful spirit that we found, but we still love that idea of heavy oak influence.
Yeah. For the people that really, really are into their single malts, you mentioned Clynelish and Linkwood.
Oh yeah.
Linkwood is one of those great all-time favorite, beautiful single malts out there that you don't see that much as a single malt, but it was always a blender's secret, but it's got so much to offer.
Right.
Clynelish, of course, in the Diageo and later in one of the core expressions and very important to the Diageo collection, oily, thick, but Linkwood more or less a forgotten one for...
Well, so a lot of these whiskies we'll talk about are blending whiskies.
Yeah.
They've always meant to be part of a blend. I think we're unusual as a blending company, as a whiskey maker, that we kind of we celebrate the components. So rather than hiding what goes into it, we give you the exact recipe, the complete breakdown.
Yeah, you can find it on your website. It's amazing, up to the percentage and everything.
Yeah, so sometimes in the past, a little bit too much information. But you know, we try and toe the line. But if you have ever looked at our current fact sheets with the recipe breakdown and the percentages, if you look at the circle, we're not allowed to tell you the age of the components of the whiskey. But if you know anything about oak trees and how you age an oak tree, you count the rings. I've said too much already.
Yeah. We'll beep it out. And so Orchard House, yes, we talked it in our previous podcast when we discussed it with John almost 2 years ago already, in the lovely Chiswick studios. But you moved on to a different place, but we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got something new for my, and if you listen back in 2026 or 27, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still out there. But for me, it's relatively new and. Like I said, always those beautiful names that your imagination goes wild, and this killed the nectarosity. Nectarosity. That's a word Well,
it's a word we made up.
yeah, that's amazing.
There's something fun about that. I mean, that's definitely, we talk about being whiskey makers. Whiskey maker is a word we came up with. It's in the same vein as being a winemaker. And same with nectarosity, a word we made up. A word that encapsulated what we wanted with this whiskey, which was generosity of nectar. So abundant sweetness. I actually remember it was the beginning of this year in January, and we'd gone away for Christmas. We came back to the office and we'd been deliberating over what to call this whiskey. And to give you an idea, as we have it in our glass, it's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's...
Oh, this is... Yeah, I'm looking at the label because a lot of people read the back labels, but you do it a different way. You make the most amazing labels on the front with some great artwork, and the artwork already says a lot about the whiskey. So I'm looking here at an orange label in the beginning, but on that a layered cake with fruit on there and with everything else going on there. So
there's also, if you notice,
amazing
honey dripping off of the words.
Yeah. Oh, honey dripping from the words. Yes, yeah.
Which, I mean, I think is a perfect way of describing this whiskey. Because again, that generosity of nectar, that lovely sweetness. And it was this thing of going away, coming back, and I think it was James who pushed this little kind of piece of paper across our desks and said, I've got a name for it. Now, nectarosity as a whiskey is big, it's vibrant, it's bold. It definitely isn't the kind of whiskey that you push a name across a desk on a piece of paper, but it worked. And we were like, yeah, this is cool.
Did he came up with it? Because I read it on the website, and because I did some reading. If nectar is the food of gods and joy comes from celebrating with others, we need a new word.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so poetic. And this is poetry in a bottle. It really is poetry in a bottle. On the label, there's so much going on, but also, well, I've got the glass and smelling, having a wee taste. So much different than the Orchard House. I was expecting a lot of the fruitiness that like the Orchard had in there, and a lot more zest and sweetness from, if you look at the cake and honey, but it's like very complex pastry layers from green apples to raspberries to it goes all over the place.
Now, if I were to tell you this is also liquid and Kleinlich primarily,
that's completely different. When you were talking about two distilleries, two main components in there, and then a world of difference.
Absolutely. And that's the so it's the casks. So again, when we were using first of all bourbon casks for Orchard House, we were talking about water ridge bourbon barrels. Again, I think you could probably run an entire 3-segment podcast on water rinsing bourbon barrels. But we were then, knowing that, looking for certain kind of casks that we wanted, had more of that kind of classic bourbon character. And then we also decided that maybe, and this happened about 7 years ago when we started making it, let's not wait for bourbon companies to put bourbon into a cask. Why don't we buy virgin American oak? And then why don't we put Girvan in it?
Girvan from a grain,
yeah,
one of the greatest grain distilleries out there, biggest ones out there.
And then let's season it for a year. And let's take the Girvan out, we'll put it into another cask, and let's put some Kleinlich in that.
Whoa.
So let's not wait for it to pass through the bourbon companies. Let's actually control our own destiny and age it ourselves.
Yeah, you control your own destiny, but it's also a very bold move because virgin oak, that means so many vanilla compounds, so many other things happening. And then now we get into the geeky stuff of chemistry because there's a lot of things with sugars and acids happening and chemical components changing and making new flavors. That's one of the reasons why you don't see much of the virgin oak out there.
And so that's why we've seasoned it with the grain whiskey and then taken that out and aged it further. And then we're using that seasoned cask as like a second filled virgin American oak. I mean, at some point you kind of remove all designations and it just becomes a cask, right?
Yeah, it just becomes a cask. That's a beautiful word. And what I say, a lot of people know about seasoning. And maybe for listeners that are not well educated or well known in the whiskey industry, seasoning means you put another liquid in a virgin cask. It will soak it up, and then we'll take it out and we'll leave it. And a lot of people know sherry oak seasoning because that is one of the things that people. But grain seasoning.
Yeah, well, because we can't say it's grain whiskey yet because it's only been there for a year. Obviously,
Grain spirit.
It's grain spirit. We age it further. It then also goes into nectarosity. So what you're seeing here is layers of complexity, which is sort of, I'd say, classic of the Compass Box Core collection now. Like we're trying to push. So this is a clear kind of classic flavor within Scotch. Sweetness and honey and vanilla and that fruit, but we're trying to do it in a Compass Box way.
Yeah, the Compass Box way. I like that. I like the Compass Box way. As I told you, a lot of people know that I got involved in Compass Box from virtually day one, so it's close to my heart, and we go long back. But it's always been on my mind. It's been always there. But this was one of the bottles. If I look at the label, it can put people off, especially the old style whiskey drinkers. But tasting it, whoa, opens up a new world.
So it's funny, you talk about the label, and so much time and effort goes into both the name and the label and the liquid. And the reason why the labels are the way they are is because we feel like the effort you put into assembling the blend requires something that looks like it tastes. It has to be evocative. It has to be something that touches people emotionally. If we're not a distillery, we don't have a distillery. We can't just say distillery name, X years, certain type of cask. That's a great way of marketing if you built up a reputation as one place. But for us, we're trying to create this connection between flavor and feeling and story. And so a lot of that is the effort we put into kind of how it looks.
And it maybe it's the wrong way I said it. It might put people off because you really make the tasting notes visual.
Oh yeah.
It's not, you don't need the back label. You just look at the front label and, people go in there. You go into an off license, you buy a bottle of wine. The first thing you know, or whiskey or rum or whatever, you look at the label because that's how it works. It's just you look at the label, then you go to the back label, then you think, oh, this is interesting or not. But tasting notes, putting in a picture, an artwork, really, it makes it more difficult to understand, but because there's so much going on, but also so lovely.
But also, I don't know if you're seeing this as well, but like the labels in whiskey especially are evolving.
Yeah.
People are putting much more information on it. They're putting more kind of paintings, kind of like drawings, all that kind of stuff. Because I think that the whiskey audience is maturing into it. It's not that they want something that's got this kind of old traditional style. They want something that makes them feel a way.
Yeah, but maybe it is because the world is changing. You're changing. We're getting older. You come across a lot more things, and it's the experience of life. So it's also your thoughts are changing. So it is a very natural thing to evolve in your palate, but also in your whiskey and also in your whiskey making.
Absolutely.
Without forgetting where you came from.
Well, it's funny you mentioned where it came from because we moved very quickly onto the peat monster.
That's what I
would say.
And we didn't rehearse this, but it works.
I'm a big fan of a good segue. The reason obviously we're laughing is because the peat monster. So Orchard House released in 2021, Nectarosity new in 2024.
Beautiful.
Peat Monster first released in 2005. That's a bit longer ago than the others.
A little bit longer ago, but I remember when the peat monster came out, there was a big demand for peaty whiskies, especially here in Northern Europe, not so much in the US or South America. But peat was what was the main thing, and it still is a very, very large part of people's palate. But that was one of the reasons the peat monster came out. So it is a very, very thing to do.
We kind of feel like, because we've been talking about this, kind of looking back at the history of Compass Box, I think you reach a certain point in your time as a business, and 20 years, so that was 2020, 25 years, which is next year, you're allowed to be a bit introspective. Not that we talk too much about it, but we were kind of talking about when Peat Monster first came out. It was originally called the Monster. It was actually made for an American retailer, Park Avenue liquor store. And it was this sort of back and forth between John, our founder, and the store itself, and it was like more peat. And
which is strange for an American, because they were not into their peat whiskies at all.
absolutely not, but Park Avenue was.
Yeah, and Park Avenue was.
And finally, John sends a sample and goes, "This one's a monster," and that's where the monster came from.
Yeah.
And what we kind of feel when we look back at it now is that the early 2000s, peat wasn't even that big. It was
a flavor compound.
It was a flavor, and then from there, with the Peat Monster, almost this peat arms race starts, and everyone's trying to kind of up each other. They're trying to kind of escalate the peat. They're going to go more and more and more. And we took a decision. I mean, John took a decision very early on that we weren't going to compete in the peat.
Compete in the peat. Beautiful.
We were going to try and take it in a different way, Compass Box way, if we will.
Yeah.
Which is
because if you think about the label, the name, the Peat Monster, you go like, okay, this is going to be heavy ppms, more peat, more peat, more peat. But actually,
it's not.
It is a very peaty for a Compass Box, but it's got so much more layers in there. So yeah, of course, the smokiness is in it.
There's a depth to it. It's a complex. I mean, so one of the reasons we blend whiskey is for balance. The other one is for complexity. A lot of people don't talk about blending for complexity. You often talk about blends needing kind of this position in the market where they're a bit cheaper, a bit more affordable. But actually, if you take great quality components, which I'd like to say we do, and then you put them together, you can make something that is unlike the original distilleries themselves. I mean, Peat Monster is a great example of this because it's 1/3 Lefroy and 2/3 Caolila.
So the heavy style peat.
Right, but you're mitigating that heavy Lefroy with a little bit of that sweet smoke from the Caolila, and you end up with something that is unlike the other two. And especially if you're looking at kind of peated whiskey, we have so few distilleries who make peated whiskey. The opportunity to explore, to kind of broaden the horizon of that flavor, it's very tantalizing. It's very exciting for us.
Yeah, it is, and it's you're talking about Lefroy and Caolila. You think about the big smoky compounds, but actually it is very accessible. It is very indulgent. It's the second taste. It's not only burning your mouth, but it's so much more than the chocolate is coming through, the coffee.
It undulates is the way I describe it. It has this lovely journey across the palate where it begins on the nose with more of the Caolila. There's a little bit of Lefroy coming in. Then at the front of the palate, there's Lefroy, and then suddenly coming. I need to be careful here because if I say Lefroy and Caolila too many times, there's a trademark problem.
Yeah,
it's whiskey from the Lefroy distillery and whiskey from the Caolila distillery. I'm using the shorter names as a shorthand, but because it's not Lefroy, it's not Caolila, it's something else entirely.
It's not their style. It's a completely different whiskey that coming from their stills, and they make more than their own brand than that. So it's not burning your palate. So you can have this as a peat whiskey, and we're still going through to other whiskeys. But normally, if you go like, oh, this is my last whiskey, and then it ends because my flavor palette is completely gone. After that, I can't taste anything else. That's not true with this.
People ask me, why is this number 3? So we talk about having a core collection of 4, and
we're going in through the core collection. So how you would, Compass Box is so Orchard House first, Nectarosity, then third whiskey is the Peat Monster. Exactly.
And it's like, but there's one more whiskey to come. Surely you must finish on peated whiskey, and it's no. There's another thing. There's another 4th dimension of flavor within Scotch that you definitely need to give the space for it. Again, speaking of neat segues, we move on to crimson casks.
Crimson casks. Talking about crimson cask, and I'm looking at the label, and I'm oh, wow, beautiful red label. A fierce looking guy, like a Viking kind of style cow, and I know it's the king of the woods coming straight to me, and a crown of oak, like a old barrel cask.
So this is our red man. We talk about
Red
this.
man.
Yeah. So have you ever heard of the green man before?
Yes, I heard about the green man. It's something different than the blue man, but blue man group is also lovely to see, but nothing to do with drinks.
Not related to the blue man. Green man's this cool kind of idea. It's of a pagan kind of pre-religious kind of concept of rebirth, new life. And when we were talking about crimson casks, we were talking about this idea of metamorphosis, the changing of a thing. When you think about cask finishing, when you think about even the cask interaction within whiskey, it is a metamorphosis. The liquid goes to the cask changes the liquid changes the cask itself, and then it comes out, and they're forever different from that process. This may sound a bit, I don't know, poetic, a bit philosophical.
No. Poetic is nice. A lot of people go, I'm not into poetic stuff, but we were talking about nectarosity. It's also like that. There is a lot of poets, and there's also a lot of poets out there that don't know that there are poets. So there is a lot of poetry in there. So
what's that old phrase? They were poets and they weren't even aware.
Yeah. And like John said and Jane said, it's like also putting whiskeys together is like composing music or composing a poet maybe. So you put on layers in there and you come back to it, you change it, you go back to it, it evolves.
Yeah.
Something happens, you cross out a line, you go back to it.
I mean, you know the famous Picasso quote that sat in our old office.
Yeah.
I begin with an idea and become something else.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of like poetry. There is a lot of kind of creative endeavor that goes into these things. And with Crimson Casks, there was this sort of exciting moment where we talked about Spice Tree.
Yeah.
We talked about Story of the Spaniard. We mentioned these whiskies in a lot of conversations as a business. And we said, well, there's a huge overlap. And what you're going to see from the core collection here is that they each have their own unique identity. And so if Spice Tree was rich, intense, and spicy, and Story of the Spaniard was rich, intense, and sherried, why have two whiskies that occupy similar territories but overlap with each other when you combine the best of both worlds?
So this is heavily sherry driven. So a lot of people go like, ooh, wow.
Yeah.
The magic word of whiskey, as I call it, sherry. And
So this was the other funny thing, is we were like, we want to make a sherried whiskey. We have made Story of the Spaniard in the past, and Story of the Spaniard was our interpretation of sherry. It's not something historically Compass Box has done a lot of. We love to play around with sherry, but in terms of sherried whiskey, it's very hard. If we talk about balance, as we were talking earlier, it's very hard to balance sherried whiskey.
a lot of people that think about sherry whiskey, they go like, as they call it, the sherry bomb. It is heavily on wood. You have to chew it before you can drink it. It is very, very much when I talk to people on live shows and during tastings and go, oh, I really love the sherry taste. And then first of all, they don't know what sherry is about, which one of the 7 sherries it is. And then they go like, oh, it's the red fruit. It's the heavy taste. It's the oiliness. But like you say, it is very hard to get it right because it's like also smoky whiskey. It can be only smoke and very heavily on the smoke, but sherry cask can be heavily on the oak, and you forget about the layers underneath. It's also so much part of sherry.
Absolutely, and that's the great thing when we're blending, is that we're able to then take other components. So there's a little bit of red wine cask going on here. So a barrique, we broke it down into a hoggy, and that allows us to get a bit of that kind of sourness, a bit of sharpness. Because if you think about primarily sherried casks, then you're thinking about a lot of sweetness, singular notes, but the underlying kind of structure of it, one of the tasting notes for this whiskey is chocolate fudge cake, I should say. And it's funny because actually when we add use a bit of what we used to put in Spice Tree, which are custom French oak toasted casks, and it helps to kind of undercut that sweetness, gives it a bit more layer, a bit more structure, and you end up with a deeply complex whiskey. Not a sherry bomb, as we were talking about earlier, but layered. And I think that's, for us, it's like, again, Compass Box way of doing it. We want to make a sherry whiskey. People like sherry whiskey. We can't make a sherry bomb. Everyone makes a sherry bomb. What are we going to do?
Yeah, you want to take components out, put something else in it, put your own stamp on it, and get it more, like you said, making it more interesting, and not one particular way. So for every moment of the day, there is a whiskey out there, but you can use this also all day long on a different occasion. Really, really lovely, beautiful, deep red color, mahogany.
So the funniest thing is that when we came up with the concept and the idea of crimson casks, we hadn't actually finished the recipe. And because, again, people often ask, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, or in our case, the recipe or the name or the label. The truth is it all evolves at the same time. So Nectarosity and Crimson Casks are two new whiskies. They have been in production for the last 2 years. I'm sure John would have alluded to some work we were doing.
Could definitely provoke it. I tasted some of his experiments out there that never seen the light of day, because some of it worked, some of it didn't.
And that's the great thing, is that because we are very small, independent, we don't have to put any whiskey out that doesn't work.
No,
but that doesn't mean we don't try.
No,
and part of trying is failing. But mainly it's about learning from those and iterating upon it. And like I said, took 2 years probably to put these two whiskies together from the basis of knowing that we wanted to create this tighter core collection of 4 whiskies. And when the color of Crimson Casks finally comes together and we were like, what is going on here? This is amazing. It's exactly what we thought it would be. Very important to point out, Compass Box has never released a whiskey with caramel coloring, never released a whiskey which is chill filtered. I think, as it's been described by people in the whiskey community, we have integrity blends.
Integrity blends. Yeah, that makes it more difficult. But even if I go back to one of the other glasses, the Nectarosity or the Orchard and the Peat, it works so, it touches all flavor profiles. It goes from left to right, from light to vanilla to red fruits to smokiness. But it's really, really nice that we put those 4 whiskeys together as for a core range, but completely different. And there is, for everybody out there is something that really, really is there out for you. But going back and forth, it makes them involved as well.
Yeah.
So much more.
So they all have like a reference to each other, even though they're independent whiskies. You could talk about the kind of components of the Orchard House, the Nectarosity, that kind of the link with the Klein Leash that you can follow that thread through. But you look at the cask influence or the peat monster, you can look at the kind of how does Isla work, how does peat work, but also how can you make it something really different. And then with Crimson Casks, it's like, how can you make a sherried whiskey, but also change it, elevate it, use other blending components to isolate those kind of different flavor notes. And then the biggest thing for us, so having a core collection of 4 whiskies that occupy 4 directions of flavor, that do 4 different things, allows us to then go and do what we also love to do, which is to experiment, to push the boundary even further. And that's the 5th whiskey we have in front of us.
Yeah, we have a 5th whiskey. So we're leaving the core range for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And out of his backpack, Alex got a beautiful new bottle, a very dark label. It was really intriguing. And then, talking intriguing, Secrets of Smoke. And you go like, whoa, this is come to the dark side, my friend. This is 52%, so a lot higher ABV than what you previously done. You always work with around 46%.
Core collection is 46%. We think that's the best ABV to enjoy it at. It gives you a bit of play if you want to add a bit of water to it. Sometimes we'll do 43% with whiskies, but for these four, works really well at 46.
You just put it out there the way it works.
Yeah.
Not so much on what people want or...
Something that we've always talked about is that if you release a cask strength whiskey, you are alienating anyone who doesn't know how to dilute a whiskey.
Yeah.
And you're kind of leaving it up to them to kind of work out their own balance, which is great. And that's why I love some cask.
That's why I have 5 glasses a night, because I can't work out the ABV I like. And then, this doesn't work. I don't chuck it away. I'll just drink it and and go from scrap again.
But also, you know what you're doing. You have time and you can kind of experiment. I think for most people, they just want to be able to pour whiskey into a glass and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So then we come to Secret of Smoke and it's 52%. But that's because you need the ABV to get into what we're trying to talk about here. So core collection of 4 whiskies, very flavor driven. Secret of Smoke is about this underlying character in smoky whiskey that we find so compelling. So Peat Monster really helps to illustrate this. The Peat Monster is, as we were saying before, not an overbearing peated whiskey, but actually has layers to it. One of those layers is sweetness, this sweet smoke, and it's one of those things that we don't really talk about a lot, but peated whiskey, smoky whiskey, doesn't have to be one-dimensional, much like the sherry. It can be many different things. So how can we use blending to isolate that sweetness, to take those little elements out of it, to then showcase that there is fruit flavor, that there's like sugar, there's honey going on in the background?
Yeah, it is a little bit of the Peat Monster on steroids, but still the other flavor compounds you are talking about, they're holding up. It's not over-dominated by the smokiness.
No, the smoke comes at first, it washes over the palate, and as it begins to reside, because we all know that peated whiskey, smoky whiskey is very prominent up front, and it also has a wonderful finish, but in that middle section is where we find the secret, and the secret is this lovely kind of like fruitiness to it. There's a little bit of a component of Lafroig in ex-Marsala casks.
Ooh. So they got the sweetness of the Marsala, the beautiful Italian sweet wine.
So I'm turning around the bottle because, as with many of our limited editions, we like to publish as much information as possible.
There is a lot of information. I have to put on my glasses for that. It's a good thing that people can't see that. So can we take the Peat Monster was second fill Spanish red wine barrel?
Yeah, so we're taking Peat Monster and then finishing it further. So
so you're taking the Peat Monster and Spanish red wine barrel. So and then Calila, Pablo Cortado sherry seasoned blood.
Exactly.
So a lot more of the red fruits. Ardmore Distillery first fill sherry hogsheads, a lot more sherry, but with a nice Ardmore style kind of. I think it's always a very hard kind of smokiness in there, but
right.
With the sherry moves it.
But look at the percentage of the Ardmore.
22%.
Right, so it's significant.
Yeah, it is.
But what it does is it helps because it's hard, it's strong, but the other elements help to peel back that kind of rough exterior.
Yeah. Even things as Lafroig, first fill Marsala Barrique, really, really beautiful. And then blended malt parcel, primarily recharred hogsheads, and that's only 2.8%, and the other one was 5.7. And then talking one of my favorite smoky whiskeys, the Bowmore Distillery, a lot of layers in there, 2.5. And you think 2.5, that's not much, but taking 2.5 out of there changes completely. So you need it, even if it's a small percentage, it can has a huge influence on the overall.
It's one of those funny things where when we taste it with and without, you know it's gone. And that's such a hard thing to explain.
It is, because a lot of people go like, 60-70% comes from the mood, the ex-barrels, but taking 1 or 2% out, you know what you're missing.
Yeah, well, we don't use filler whiskies.
No.
Every single component in each of these blends holds...
A filler whiskey is what like the old blends did with the grains.
Yeah.
More or less.
I don't comment on this.
I'll explain that later because we're independent, so don't worry.
But it's this own, yeah. So each element has its reason to be there. It does something to the whiskey. It integrates to the blend. It moves something forwards and creates this wholeness, this complexity, this completeness, and that's really a fundamental aspect of compass box blending.
Wow. It is something new. It is something completely different. Also still very, very much layered. And this is this is the newest expression. It is one of the limited editions.
Yes.
We were talking core range, but this one's not a core range.
Launching today.
Launching today, and we're speaking end of November, just before the Hague Whiskey Festival.
Yes.
So people that are out there, then
complete coincidence. I feel very lucky that I get to travel around the Netherlands with this bottle.
And I'm very privileged to sit down with you because I heard you were coming and thought, well, Compass Box, we need to do something new because there is a lot of things happening in the whiskey world.
Oh yeah,
in a whole, and there's a lot more to come.
So this is what I hope happens from this point onwards: is we have these wonderful core collection of whiskies that is this sort of great beginning for conversations. One of our whiskey makers, Michael, he has this great line. Single malts are statements, blends are conversations.
Ooh, that's deep. Another poet.
Yes, we seem to exclusively hire poets on Compass Box.
Looks like it.
But I love that idea because I think it's completely true. Is if you look at a single malt whiskey, it's trying to tell you about itself.
Yeah. And
you can either relate to it or you don't relate to it, and that's about it. But a blend, we're trying to invite conversation. We're trying to get you in. This isn't a destination. Each of these whiskeys doesn't represent the final point in that direction of flavor. It's merely an avenue through it. It's a kind of route along that journey that we want to be part of, that also will inevitably take you to other places. But that's the fun of it. That's what's so great about blending.
And that's the great thing about Compass Box, because it started out with an idea on a kitchen table in Southwest London. And then it took from there to a hairdresser with 3 people. And then it took that from a beautiful studio. And the team grew, whiskey makers team grew, even the Glasgow blend, which is one part of the, of course, still a big part of the core range. And it's the Glasgow blend and the Arts blend. Beautiful whiskeys. And it keeps evolving. The team grew. It doesn't stop there. So I'm very much looking forward to go on this journey and hop on the train and keep evolving with your ideas and your great ideas looking into the future, because I'm sure of it that you're already working for the next 2 years, 3 years with new experience, new stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm sure because it just doesn't happen overnight. I knew that sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to make one of the whiskeys as a final. So
at some point, I would love to show people how we make a whiskey from the beginning to the end of it, like all the way, the whole process. The difficulty is at the moment, it is secret. It is also very weird sometimes.
It is.
But that transparency, that thing that's always been part of Compass Box, like trying to get people who are really interested. The secret is we're geeks, we're nerds.
Yeah, but we're also lovers of whiskey. We also are people that enjoy life and a good drink and a good conversation. We're not only geeks.
No.
One of the reasons we made the podcast was because there's so many people out there that don't know the joy of whiskey, and you don't have to break down what we did with the last one. Every single component, it's more or less like what we did with the nectarosity. Look at the label, enjoy it, make a pastry, go out there, get your hip flask, dance in the rain, and just enjoy yourself. That's it.
And the other part of it, if you want to know more, it's still there.
Yeah,
that's one of the core philosophies with what we've been doing with our whiskies. We're not trying to dumb them down.
No.
We're trying to make it more easily understood at the surface level. So you look at the label, you understand it, you can connect with it quickly. But the more you delve into it, the more satisfying it is. a proper nerd or geek kind of passion has to be fulfilling all the way through. And so for us, it's like, know that we put as much as we can into making these whiskies, as much information, as much detail, as much kind of nerddom, let's say, so that if you were to ask more and more, I could literally answer these questions ad infinitum.
Yeah.
I think last time I was in the Netherlands, I did a 4.5 hour tasting.
Yeah. It is like, I was just thinking about a professional football player.
Mm-hmm.
You enjoy him on the pitch,
Mhm.
but you don't see the effort he put in on the training and all the techniques he's learning and all the other things, the boring stuff in training rooms and physical stuff. It is all those little components that you don't see. We only see the final part we have to enjoy.
Yeah.
I think that is the main part. We need to enjoy, but if you want to come look at a training,
Yeah.
go on a website
Definitely.
in this case, and you can go and find out a lot of the things on videos, or go to a tasting with you.
Yeah. Or I would say this is why I love doing kind of podcasts like this.
Yeah,
We just chat about it.
we just chat about it, and I have some beautiful glasses right there in the morning. And maybe we should conclude this podcast, because otherwise we get boring and too much. And we don't have time for a bonus episode, but I'm sure I'm going to make a bonus episode, because soon I'll be in London and I'm visiting these guys, and we'll have a look in their kitchen. So for now, just I'll raise a glass and Slantje, cheers. Thank you for being on the show, Alex.
Absolutely
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Dit was Drop or Dram. Vergeet niet om je te abonneren op onze podcast of kijk op onze website www.dropordram.nl. Tot de volgende keer.